Hey, welcome to another episode of the Not Scrum Dumb Podcast. I'm Adriana Marshall, professional Scrum trainer, and that is my amazing co-host.
Grand Scrum Master Scott, everyone.
Today, we're going to be talking about sizing and estimating in Scrum. We're going to talk about a few different ways that you can do it, give you an intro to a few different options. Here is our handy dandy guide. We're going to be talking about exact estimations, relative sizing, and flow metrics. So let's first start with exact estimations. And it is exactly what you think it is. Right? 1, 2, 3 days is going to take me X amount of time to get to my destination, right? I don't know about you, Scott, but when I would use Waze, they tell me I'll be there in 30 minutes. And at least here in LA traffic, that's never
Mm.
correct. And it is absolutely the least useful in something as complex as traffic. So we consider that least useful in complex environments. Scott, do you have anything else to add to this?
Yeah, we are terrible as human beings in exact estimation. I remember my project management days, whether I'm building a house or whatever project, I always tell the customer, hey, it's going to take 5 months for me to build your house. 5 months come and go. I'm in the 6 months. Well, 7 months, things happen, but we always start the project out by giving the customer an exact date and an exact time, budget, and things like that. Exact estimation seems to be the tool of choice for your traditional project management. But think about it. As Andriana just said, when we use something that's as simple as our GPS map going from point A to point B, how often does that happen according to what they recommended? It's just a recommendation. So it is useful. I get the idea with exact estimations that we need to know an idea of how long it's going to take. We definitely need to know about how much it's going to cost and things like that, but that is the least useful if you are in a complex diagram. Now, if you're in simple work, that is the estimation of choice. So simple work would be your traditional project management. Adriana.
Yeah. And so the other option is relative sizing. So this is a mechanism for sizing different items relative to each other. So instead of assigning absolute value or exact estimations or time frames, they determine the relative size to each item compared to others. Now, the way I learned this, I don't know how you learned this, Scott, but I learned it using fruit. So a grape is smaller than a watermelon, pretty obvious, or an apple and so forth. So you're relating them to each other. And if you change up the fruit, then you change up the size and how they relate to each other. So that's how I learned relative sizing. What about you, Scott?
I did it with animals. I remember comparing a small chicken to a fox, to a bear, to a horse. It was going through the different sizes of animals. Now, which animal is the smallest animal out of all of these images that we see? Of course, it was the chicken. Okay, that
Yeah.
was our starting point. That was our baseline. And then it went up as big as an elephant. Of course, that was the biggest. So we're comparing the chicken and to the elephant in terms of sizing and relating that to work and complexity and a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, I started with animals. You started with fruit. That's awesome.
Yeah. And there are different ways that you can do this. It could be using t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large, like the chicken is small, the fox is medium, the elephant is large, and it's all relative, right? So we can probably come up with more options, but it's based on what you currently have. And then story points, we're not going to dive deep into that. We have a video explaining what story points are and how you can use them. So you could check that video out in our last one, and then planning poker as well to help assign the relative value in a group setting. Do you have anything that you want to dive deeper into on either of these, Scott?
One more thing, I would like to highlight a little bit about planning poker. That was the starter tool that I used to get started with my team, and we actually used the Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence starts out with zero, then you have one, then you add the previous two numbers to get the next number. So 1 plus 1 equals 2, then 2 plus 1 equals 3, and 3 plus 2 equals 5, and it goes up from there. And typically, when you use that platform, again, just think of those as buckets. We're giving you t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large. We're giving you fruit that we can use. We're giving you animals that you can use. Fibonacci sequence, just another tool and technique that you could use all of this stuff for planning poker. Yeah, Andriana, anything else?
Yeah. The other thing I would add is that same Fibonacci sequence is used with story points. All
All
right.
right, very
So
well.
it's also as you said, you started off with your team using this because it is the most common and it is the easiest to understand. Teams typically start with story points or t-shirt sizing and using planning poker. That's the most common that I see out there. It doesn't have to be the option that you use. Scott, what do you have anything else to add to this?
Yes, Andriana, it is the most common and easy to understand, especially if your team is coming from waterfall methodology. Most of us have experience in exact estimations. If you've been doing things most of your life that way, there's a transition that goes in there. We mean easy from that standpoint. The whole idea about relative estimating is really about the conversation. It's never about the number in Scrum and Agile in this environment. We're really trying to get all the assumptions on the table. So we're going to use one of these methods that we're talking about in relative estimating to really, Adriana, what assumptions are you making? Scott, what assumptions are you making? Listeners, what assumptions are you making? And the number is just really going to help us have that conversation. So, for example, if we have everyone say that this complexity of work is a 3, great. But what if a person says it's a 1? So we want to highlight that person that says it was a 1 and say, hey, you said this is a 1 where mostly everybody else says it's a 3. What are you thinking? Or it could be a 5. Hey, 5, what are you thinking? Most of us saying 3. And one of the reasons you want to do that is because of a concept called groupthink. You don't want your team just estimating this because everybody on the team says so or because the lead person says so. So I think relative estimating is a great tool to use, not only for all the reasons we identify, but also to eliminate groupthink. And that's just everybody just going along with what the leader of the group looks like or sounds. Andriana, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think those are really great points. And one thing that you mentioned is avoiding being concerned with the points themselves. And we can not use story points at all. We don't have to use relative sizing. We can actually use flow metrics. What are flow metrics? They're used to measure how value moves through the value stream of a software product or any complex product from one end to the other. So, what may that potentially look like? You may be actually focused on throughput instead of actually sizing each one of these. I'll tell you, in my experience, I've used same sizing and throughput together. It's more about the conversation and making sure each of our product backlog items are somewhat the same size to get us to a place where we can understand our throughput as opposed to, is this a 3 or a 5? No, I think it's a 5. Instead of arguing about the point itself, it's really focusing on an understanding of the work and making it small enough, so that we can finish it in a particular time period. I've also seen this, at least I've used this with Monte Carlo. So you can go Google Monte Carlo. It's really easy to use any template. You could just input the numbers of the time frame that you're tracking throughput on a consistent basis, actual throughput to be able to predict in the future, because that's what people do care about. We don't talk that much about predictability, but everyone does want to know when we're achieving our product goal. And that's something for us to all to be concerned about and tracking. Anything to add to this, Scott?
Yes, I will highlight a little bit about the value stream for those of you who haven't heard of that. When you think about the value stream, I want you to think about how long does it take? What are all the steps involved from item getting from point to see how many steps are involved in the steps? So when we think about throughput, the basic question we're asking is how long is it taking for this product or feature to go from A to Z to get it in the customer's hand. And then we're going to look at that through a value stream mapping as a technique that we can look at all the steps that involve in that. And we're asking ourselves, hey, is there some of these steps that we can actually eliminate? That way, if we do that, the idea or the thought process is that if we eliminate some steps, we should be able to deliver this sooner to the customer. The other thing I'm thinking about throughput, Andriana, and I do use it in my environment. For example, if I'm facilitating daily Scrum, let's say I'm watching a product backlog item that's been sitting there for 2 or 3 days. It should be moving. If that was stuck in that particular place for a while, then what's going on with the throughput of this item? We should be able to move this item in a 2 week sprint from point A all the way to completion and get it into the customer's hands. So that's what we're looking at. And those are some of the ways and ideas that you can use this throughput, again, as an alternative to the other two methods. Hope that helps.
Yeah. The last thing is it allows teams to continually optimize their processes in real time and deliver greater value to their organizations. You're getting this feedback a lot faster using throughput than you would relative sizing or exact estimations. All right. Anything else to add, Scott?
No, we've given you 3 options for you to be legendary with your tapes. Amazing. Great job.
If you made it to the end of this video, then you have an attention span greater than a goldfish. And if you want to dive deeper, check out the story points video that we did a few weeks ago. I think you'll really like it.
Be legendary, everyone, but not Scrum Dumb. See you in the next episode.